Basically what I'm trying to do here is not... I have been reading Agamben and translating his articles and some of his books in Finnish, and I think that I know his style quite well, his style of writing, his style of writing Italian, and I think that he borrowed some part of his style from Walter Benjamin, but that's not the case. There are some things that irritate me in his writings much. I think really much. Like I'm always kind of pissed off. But then there is something that I like so much, and I would like to explain you what is this something that I like in his writings. But first, about reading Agamben, reading Agamben is what I'm trying to do, and this means that I try to first explain very shortly what was Agamben's intention with Homo Sacer or Homo Sacer project in his own words, because in the last book of the project Homo Sacer, the uso dei corpi, or the use of the bodies, there is the last chapter where Agamben tries to look back and say, tries to clarify what he was doing during the project. And I think that the Homo Sacer, it's my personal opinion, it's and Agamben says also in preface that he leaves it open because as a matter of fact, he is not able to sort of finish the project in a way. It's not able to make it complete. And I think that as a project, it was kind of a, how do you say, a failure. Not a total failure, of course, but a kind of a failure. And I think the reasons are, and I'll try to explain in what I'm saying, what are the reasons of that incompleteness or that failure. But first, how Agamben explains his Homo Sacer. His idea was, as he says, to cancel or to revoke or to make inactive the place and original structure of politics, and at the same time expose or show us it's the arcanum imperii of the politics, its basic origins or something. And the origins that constitute the very fundament or ground of Western politics, to expose them, to make us perceive them in a sense. And this arcanum imperii that has been in politics completely, as he said, also this is true philosophy. In politics, the arcanum imperii, or the hidden origins or hidden principle of politics, has been at the same time totally exposed and totally hidden, and he wants to sort of show us this arcanum imperii. And what is the starting point? Is the bare life or naked life or la nuda vita. It's the term that Agamben, I think, borrows from Italian poet. Federico maybe knows the name, but I don't remember the name, but it's a...
The Italian poet who used the terms.
It's from 1920s, 1930s. I don't some poet. I think that it's.
It's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, something. Yeah, never mind. The bare life is he calls it as exceptio. It's the exception, and it's the exception between life as such, or biological life, and the life that has its form as life, as bios, as it calls. And this bare life is a kind of an original element of politics, and as a threshold or as a threshold between Zoe and bios. And the bare life, in the first book of Homo Sacer, he defines it as a sacred life also. And then the task Agamben has is, and I want to stress this very much because the use of body books talks a lot about the activation of this contraposition between bare life and the bios or the form of life. And the task Agamben sees or has in the beginning of the project of Homo Sacer is that to deactivate the exception of naked life, or that life that is separated from its form, or cut off from its form, or to sort of deactivate this difference and sort of restitute the bare life, or to restitute the form of life to bare life, or how do you say, the biological life. And the problem is that what does he mean by the word deactivation or destitution that in English also has the meaning of poverty and lift off the poverty and so on. And this destitution or deactivation or removing or displacing, as we used to have the project name, the displacing of politics. So that we could translate it now, destitution of politics also in the Agamben word. And we have, the Agamben's task is that we have to deactivate the bare life or naked life and return the unity of life and living in poverty, I would translate this. And these are so much of the philosophy. This is how Agamben explains his sort of project, not in only these words, but basically I think that this is the idea, that we have to find it. And the project of Homo Sacer started already before the first book in 1994. It was published or something like that, the first book of Homo Sacer. We have some essays or some writings that there is also including this, the writing on form of life. It's a new version of the old writing that was published already before the Homo Sacer project. And this is kind of a clue or key to the Agamben's thinking. And then so much of that thing, not that yet to Sacer himself, but then, okay, what I think that what I like in Agamben's thinking, as I said, is and what his thought or thinking reflects is a sort of general frustration and sort of feeling of a dead end that people living in not only Western world but in all over the globe feel in contemporary capitalist society, and I mean that it's the one global feeling or global sensation that unites the global community, this kind of frustration. And what is this frustration? It is frustration that people are now, it seems to me that Agamben tells us that we are now so bored of seeing violence as instrument. We have to, if we want to build up or construct or constitute a global community, a global political community or global politics, we have to free or set free violence as its instrument of position and make violence as an end as such. And this is he borrowed from Benjamin, of course, but and we have to turn violence from merely an instrument to an end. And that's and this, of course, is something that sounds for traditional Marxist. This sounds like Sorelian or the petit bourgeois revolutionary fascist or something like thing. But it seems to me that Agamben has some reasons, and also he has some sort of sensitivity to feel that if there is something there is something in the concept of violence, and of course in the concept of Benjaminian concept of violence in such. And of course we can always give moralistic arguments that okay, that this is an irrational irrational petit bourgeois way of thinking that of course people's lives, they have a meaning, or we have to construct meaningful life and so on. And it's the task of politics to construct meaningful life and the community around this meaningful life. And so you have to join us to make some real politics and just enter into the action and do not lament these things and so on, and just return back to keep violence as an instrumental thing. But I think that the point Agamben has here is that violence, if you read Hobbes or if you read political theory, but if you think the practices our governments or states have, they see always violence as something instrumental. We can. And of course, we have to use violence, but not in destructive way, but a constructive way. It's the means, and it's not the end, and we have to be careful on that. And how much this has been an old problem. I mean, in political philosophy, and in political theory already. Plato says that dialogue is good when we are people that we understand each other, but there will always be people, kakoi, those types who don't understand our speaking. So we have to use rhetorics or violence. This is the one. I think that I can tell, but maybe it's kind of a sensation, but to destroy state, that Agamben is strictly, I think that he is thinking in the terms of destroying state, and to create some kind of post-statal politics or political community, violence has to become the end or the ultimate end of politics, and this is it. But I don't want to end this much more. This is the sensation I have reading lots of Agamben's books, and I've been thinking also what he means. It's the first sensation now that I can say. It may sound like terrifying thing, but it's not so much. But of course, if you read about Walter Benjamin's thing, and then. What I already said before, what irritates me most is this kind of, he repeats the same thing, but everyone we are doing so. And there are these things that are, the dichotomies like this. And always in center, in middle, there is the threshold or zone of indistinction. Indifference, there is stasis, and there are all everything, wheels and so, there are potestas and autoritas, there are norm and anomy, and there are gloria and inoperosita. How do they translate in English translation inoperosita?
How is the translation of
inactivity, inactivity. Inoperativity. Okay, and
I don't know how it's inoperative.
And of course, polis and oikos and so on. And he starts from then and then ends up that there is the most important thing is that sort of zone of indistinction and so on. And it irritates really. Because and of course the rhetorics of there are coming philosophy, coming community, coming politics and so on. But and what the idea is, I think, why I was talking about violence is that I think that what Agamben seems to borrow from Benjamin is the idea of violence as poor use, as a poor use, as a kind of I could say also critically, do you mean consumption? Or not production but consumption, as a violence as a poor instrument whose use does not create or produce any product or any verke, as you see. And there is one of the problems, because I have been with Agamben's thinking, and this is only, I'm saying this only that it seems to me that in Agamben's works, the term or concept work is always absent. And he has never, I think that what is missing is that he is not very, he knows not very much about the Hegelian tradition or the Marxian tradition about the concepts of work and the idea of living labor and the idea living labor, contrast between living labor and dead labor. And actually we have in Western tradition, Western philosophical tradition, we have two concepts of work or labor. We have the classical Greek ergon, that is the basically a work that doesn't produce any product or any outside product. It's a sort of a work as action. And then we have this kind of modern thing that work as verke or opera, or something that is finished and something that you can separate from the working process or from labor process as such. And that is missing in Agamben. And I see these kind of things that are, because when he is talking about deactivating of the double potential and actual or whatever, Agamben is always talking about human activity that does not produce any sort of products. And to him, it's politics, of course, the sphere, but we can say that it's not only the sphere. It's not only politics, but it's also we can theorize in or by looking at the forms of work and their history, that there are this kind of unpolitical works that do not create any product, but are still good examples of human activity. But it's not. And this is because he says that I would say that like violence, real violence or poor violence or violence that is end as such does not leave any product behind itself. But now the case, I want to ask from Agamben what he means by the word politics and what is really Agambenian politics. What kind of politics? Ask him kind of a simple way. And then, okay, what do you such? What should we do, or what are your examples of doing politics in this post-political era, or something like that? Because in the end of this book, Use of Bodies, he says, and if revolutions correspond to the constituted power or constituted power, that is a violence that pawns and constitutes the new rule of law or new right or new system of law, for the destitutive power or this kind of displacing power, deactivating power, we need to think totally different strategies whose definitions is the task to the coming politics. And what I want to ask is, what are these totally different strategies? What are they? Do we find any paradigm or exemplum of them from Agamben's writings? So what is coming politics? Of course, there is a first thing is that and this he says, like Sergei was saying also in his presentation, Agamben says quite clearly that revolutionary violence, people that turn against the state and destroy its structures, seem to have no other choice than to create these same oppressive structures anew and again and again. And every revolution and every movement that rebels is in a way sort of, to Agamben, a reformist movement. It's a movement that has this kind of destiny, a fatum that it has to create new new potere constituita, new constituted power, new order, new state, and so on. And and we are not far away from that. That every revolution eats its children, or something like that. And this is one of the things that I have been thinking about. We are so near about this kind of sort of how do you say, rocking chair philosophy. That it's you may think that it's important to do, it's important to act, but now you don't know what will be the consequences. And I know because I'm sitting here and I have seen this already done so many times before and so on. And this is. And I admire a lot of Agamben, his erudition and so on, but to be sincere, this is not the feeling that I don't like very much when I read book, that it's only this kind of philosophy as okay. And I don't think that Agamben is here argumenting like a typical right-wing, wisecrack teenager thinker, but it's very near, or that he is a traditional anarchist in Bakunian. Even though he is very near, and I don't know what kind of line we can draw between him and traditional anarchist. Even though he tries to write this line or draw this line in his book also in a few chapters, but in few passages in the end, but they are not very convincing. Of course, I will return to them. And of course, what does it mean? What does he mean with the word politics? Is of course what I'm interested in, or coming politics, and what is the concept or the field of this coming politics? Where do we do, in a sense, this coming politics, or where should we sort of expect it to emerge? And then what are these totally different, completely different strategies, and what is their final target, and so on. And now I'm reading Agamben. Agamben says first that the power that has been only defeated with a constituent or constitutive violence will rise again in other form because of the dialectics between constitutive power and constituent power and constitutive power, between the violence that pawns the right and the violence that conserves the right. And this is the basic problem that Agamben seems to have. Already in this Altissima Povertà, Highest Poverty book that precedes the use of bodies in a sense, Agamben says that this was basically the problem, this difference between the constituent power and constitutive power. It was already some way the problem that Franciscans had, and it was and the idea of use that Franciscans tried to develop had this problem. The concept of use, Agamben says, maintained the bond, the connection to the idea of property, so the movement against the property and for the free use ends up to the constitute the idea of the, I would say in today's terms, idea of commons, maybe common property or something like that. And then I have a short excuse, because these are all notes that I made. Actually, Agamben asks the following question in the Altissima Povertà, the highest poverty. How could use really translate into an ethos and a form of life? And what kind of ontology and what kind of ethics would correspond a life that in use constitutes itself inseparable or inseparable of its form? And in the parallel work to this Altissima Povertà in the Opus Dei, he asks also, or says that the problem of coming philosophy is to think an ontology beyond the operativity, I mean say, because the activity, industriousness or something like that, operativity, the difference between operativity and command, or in an ontology beyond the operativity and command. Command is also archeo principle. And to think ethics and politics completely liberated from the concepts of will and duty, Kantian sense, or I don't remember what is the English term. Yes. And then in the use of bodies, he writes, defining the use as such signifies, on the contrary, to think a use of power or potentiality that is not a simple transit or passage or movement to the act, to the action. It signifies to work with or on the notions like hexis, habitus, habit, and to separate beyond the double potential actual habitual use. Habitual use, and habitual use is something that deactivates the use. And then he says already also, and the use is not an activity but a form of life. And what kind of form of life is use or poor use? And I think that this search or quest, we could call this with the term quest, for the form of life that is inseparable of life as such, or life or biological life, was at stake in the beginning, already in the beginning of the project Homo Sacer. But these are sort of same kind of. We can read Agamben in parallel way, the concept of use, and then his sort of theorizing about the politics in very close connection. So, what kind of politics is the coming politics if it's sort of if its works, its space, its operations, or its work lies beyond the constitutive violence or constituent violence, that is beyond people's actions or movements or interests, or beyond work, so to say. What kind of politics would be? And I don't know. If you are able, you can tell me. If you are able to, you don't have to use the word politics. But what kind of we can ask? What kind of politics we can think beyond the people's movement, beyond the revolutions, beyond the activities, beyond movement in somewhere, and that is that I try to find out, and I think that there are some hints about that also in Agamben's work. In any way, Agamben's target, as he says, is his object seems to be the sort of so-called system of law, rule of law, or we can say the juridical order as such, not its specific historical configuration, as he states very clearly. The problem with movements or with the politics or political philosophies that have sort of inside themselves the idea of potentiality and actuality, is that they don't see the juridical order or order as such as a problem, maybe you can say. And he writes so this way: according to the scheme that we have many times described, constitutive or constituent power is or constituent is that figure of power in which a destitutive power, inactivating power or deactivating power is captured and neutralized in a way that it becomes sure that it will not turn against the power or juridical order as such, but only against its determinate historical figure. So the problem with politics so far has been that it has been sort of, I think that this is kind of ironical to say, but The problem of politics has been that it's too historical. It's too bloody stuff in the historical conditions. We should think politics as a total annihilation of the juridical order. And then, but what is interesting also in the Agamben's thinking and constant power, is founding violence, I mean the revolutionary movements that renew the political order. The founding violence seems to have a double inside it. It has this kind of double, it's the inactivating or deactivating destitutive side or destructive, even though Agamben avoids to using the destruction in this sense, and he says very clearly that destitution does not mean destruction, and he, of course, there is Poland. And then this destitution or destitutive or deactivating part is something escaping, and then there is the constructive constituent part that is sort of creating some kind of product. And we can see, I can read here the difference between ergon and verke, and labor and opera, or labor and opera, of course. And this destitutive power or deactivating power does not create a state and it leaves nothing behind it. And of course we are all interested our actions should be like that do not leave nothing, no product behind them. We are very near to the contemporary artist ideas about the performance and about the events and so on. And it seemed to me that also the Agamben is very close to Deport and the idea of the artistic revolutions, and that his revolution has nothing to do with political, to tell it very short. His revolution or his movements seems to have nothing to do with political revolutions or political movements. They are more like artistic movements. And of course that's not enough to say. We have to think, of course, what is the difference today between political movements and between artistic movements or artistic revolutions and political revolutions and so on. And but in any case, it seems to be that there is some of the keys to read Agamben. So in the end I would like to ask some questions about what kind of movement, strategy and tactics should we adopt in contemporary politics. Okay, about the escaping destitutive power. What does it escape, or what does it destitute? It's of course juridical order system, norms, laws, and so on. And the answer is kind of a simple one. It detests relation. What is the problem with politics? It's a problem with the relation is the problem. I don't know what to be ironical. It seems to be also Agamben's problem as we relation, and it's and it is possible to think the sort of destitutive, deactivating power in its poor form only beyond every figure of relation. We have to get rid of relation or relationships, as Agamben says, and he states this many times. In the end of the first book on Homo Sacer, he says also that, and he sort of repeats every once in a while this, but nobody pays attention. But I to that, but it seems to be that he is wanting to get rid of every relation, and he writes in this way: we have to try to think human and political as something of a result of the disconnection of these two elements and investigate their practical and political disjunction. And then he borrows the concept of contact, because we have to get rid of relation, and relation between potentiality and actuality, and between this and that, and then we have to sort of recreate or find the contact as a contact or contatto, and he borrows the concept from Giorgio Colli, but he does not explain what Colli says means with that concept, but he takes, it seems to be like I'm getting rid of relation, and what next? Then he's, I remember there was Colli also. It really gives you this kind of idea that he's working, but it seems to be the concept of contact or contatto, he has not thought about it so much yet. Maybe in the next book, but it's that. And of course it's and I can say also that we have to make this disjunction. We have to separate potentiality and actuality from themselves and to open up the space for real coming politics and so on. But in Agamben's work there is nothing of this practical and political disjunction. I don't know what does it mean. Is it only linguistic operation or something like that in there? So on. And then a few words about the destitution or deactivation, and this is the end in a sense. Deactivate the law, leave it, do not take care of the law or right or something like that. We can ask, isn't that what we always in our normal life sort of practice? We are not thinking so much about we are always using the space, as Benjamin said, in a distractive mode, and if we have to take care that we are obeying the law, the law seems to be it functions not so well. And so it's my point, what does he mean by the activation of the law, destitution of the old politics, or this kind? What is the real meaning? And we are on the sort of there are some points that I don't like so much. And of course, Agamben repeats, and we are near this point. Once Benjamin wrote that there is nothing more anarchic than bourgeois order. Of course, and there is much there, and we can there is nothing is so radical as everyday life. Nothing is so radical as obeying the norm and so on, and these kind of things that we are very near typical Finnish bourgeois and attitude. And then of course I don't do anything, and that's why I'm so bloody radical. Because you are so active, you are working and you are doing everything, and you are trying to do politics, but me, who I'm not doing anything, I'm the guy who is. And then he, of course, he says that real anarchy is the anarchy of power, of course. Okay, maybe we can understand this somewhere, but they are very near to be sort of obvious or self-evident things that whose sort of philosophical deepness is very difficult to understand. And of course we have to disconnect the anarchy from power, and the anarchy must be also poor anarchy, not the anarchy that has a connection or instrumental connection to power and so on. And how is this deactivation achieved or comes true? And I have a desire to say this. We sort of reached this kind of destitution or in deactivating. We can deactivate politics by living normal life, absolutely normal life. So nobody has nothing to say to us. We try to be as normal as possible. And yeah, why? Because legal order or system of law, it needs exceptions, and if there are no exceptions, it loses its sort of arcanum imperi, that is bare life, or so on. It's sort of its sort of founding principle it loses. And now we are, in a sense, I have always considered Agamben to be a little bit like a anarchistic, leftist guy, and it's and of course there's the insurrection. There was a French document written by almost 10 years ago that was very radical and very Agamben. Yeah. And that's good. But it seems to me that Agamben is talking here in the words of Christian Revolution or Arendtian good revolution, American Revolution, something like good and tidy revolution, and because it leaves the law intact and the norms intact, and it also turns or transforms the critique and rebellion, etc., into the personal choice, into a sort of therapy. And this is, I think. And now my question is, and this is what interests me really, is Agamben the Pontifex Maximus, the Pope of philosophical consultancy of today, or something like that? Because he is so very near there. Okay, then last thing. What deactivates operosità, or this industrialness, or this working, is experience of power or potentiality or potenza, but experience of a power that when the power keeps sort of stays within itself, it's in its own impotency or its power to do this kind of power that keeps its powers in itself, exposes itself exposes itself in its non-relation, as it says, with action or activity. And this is it's a poor translation, but he says, but I translate this in a sort of, when you do nothing, you are controlling yourself, and you have the power over yourself, and you have a possibility to do, but you are not doing anything, so you have sort of deactivated or destituted the power. And this seems that there are two things. First, on the surface, this seems like a typical attitude of individual living in a consumer society. Do I have to buy? I have the money to buy this, but should I buy or not? This is one of the pejorative things to say, but we can read that. But the second thing, and I also already forgot what I was saying, is it was not so bad, but if it came into my mind. I say the last thing also. And Agamben says that to have a power signifies to be on the mercy of one's own impotency. In this poetic experience, as he states clearly, in this poetic experience, power or potentiality and act are not anymore in relation, but they have an immediate contact. At this point, when dispositive is deactivated, power, potential, or potentiality becomes or turns into a form of life, and a form of life is constituted as destitution or deactivation. And so then, only two things. What is missing in Agamben? I don't understand why he's not talking about cynics like Foucault did, because their revolutionary way of life or form of life was also active life. Active, but that had nothing to do with the structures of polis, of course, in a way. And then what is missing, of course, it's always been interesting because it's the other great modern contemporary Hobbesian thinker. He never mentions, for example, René Girard. And it would be nice to read a book written by Girard on Hobbes and Agamben, a book of Agamben on Hobbes, because it seems to be that they are both inside or stuck or prisoners of sort of Thomas. So.